Slept good. Had some good dreams last night too. Last night was nice. Uh, we've been at my family's log cabin in southwestern Virginia, and they don't have AC, and it was hot. Not as hot as here, but it was hot. And sleeping in the heat, kind of that sticky, sweaty feeling, that sucks. But uh, being in good AC, nothing like it. All right, so um, anti-racism as a sustained as sustained political expression. So I bring this to the practice in the context of the Tuesday theme, which is always politics and power, and also within the weekly framework of basics, right? So the concept of basic to me means kind of just a basic, there's just a basic undercurrent, right? Very sustainable, very basic, very rudimentary. This is just this is the platform we all live on, right? So like water is basic, air is basic, just basic stuff. So in that context of basic, um, anti-racism needs to be a new basic foundation of our culture. And the reason I say this is because um, I have experienced uh, what it is like to have racism as the basis for kind of social political foundations, um, and my experience with racism being the basic kind of experience is one where it's so basic I don't even have to pay attention to it. And I'm speaking from a position of privilege. Um, and I remember, growing up in Richmond, Virginia, growing up surrounded by Confederate monuments. For 99% of my life, those Confederate monuments were so basically interwoven into my life that I didn't even notice them or what they stood for. Didn't have to, right? Didn't have to. Didn't have to give a crap. Um, all of my black friends in the neighborhood, um, they didn't really notice them either, but they did notice how cops treated them differently. They did notice how their experience with authority was so much different than mine. And while I noticed this as well, and I recognized to a very small degree my privilege and the fact that I didn't have to worry about it, how I moved forward was just simply, well, I'm not racist. I'm not racist. I've got black friends, right? The classic. I'm not racist, and um, I didn't. I don't. I don't have a good memory of any instance where I took full advantage of, the fact that uh, I had privilege over someone else, except for one time. And the one time was just a perfect example of the kind of disgusting, awful behavior that if we allow to become basic, if I were to allow to become basic in my life or as a way of interacting with other people, um, it would just be awful. It's okay. All right, I'll go into this story. Um, so I think it was a sophomore in college. I was early in my college years, and I was sick, and I wanted to go to the school medic, and had to get on the bus to do it. So I was sick. I hadn't slept. I was tired. And I got on the bus and I asked the bus driver and so it's different bus drivers all the time. And that some bus drivers would stop in front, so the bus driver was going on the right side of the road, would stop the bus would go on the right side of the road. The doctor's office was on the left side of the road. So instead of the bus going all the way around, turning around, coming back to the other side, sometimes the bus drivers would let you off. And so I asked the bus driver to let me off, and he was like, no, I won't do it, or no, I can't do it, or something. I don't know what he said, but he wouldn't do it, and that enraged me. And I waited to go all the way around the bus, and when I got off the bus, I said, you know, at the end of the day, you're just going to be a bus driver, and I'm going to be a college graduate or something like that. And I remember the guy was he was African. I remember he was African. He seemed, his accent led me to believe that being in the country was something that was pretty recent. But anyway, he was African American, and I was angry, and I was frustrated, and I was sick, and I took it out on this guy. And I remember that very clearly. I remember not caring much about it afterwards. I remember. I mean, I look back on it now, and I'm like, what a shithead you are. But I tell you this story as a preface to this larger idea of going from, racism being basic, being not racist, to the next step, which is making anti-racism basic, right? So it's just a basic way we are. We are basically anti-racist, which to me means the following. Anti-racism is going out of your way to, comparatively speaking, going out of your way to make racism have consequences. Social consequences. Currently, it's social consequences. As we're continuing on in Black Lives Matter and the protests that are continuing, the idea would be to, at a political level, make anti-racism basic. And that's basically just the idea that if you're going to be racist, act racist, support racist people in any way, shape, or form, anti-racists will recognize that, will point it out to you, and make a demand that your behavior either stops or you will have dire consequences. And so I know my understanding of anti-racism is at a rudimentary level compared to many who have probably spent much more time and study into the topic, but it really has just shown up for me in the past week. This kind of movement from from not being racist to being anti-racist. And so I'll take you into another story before we go into the practice. And the point of this is all centered around this concept of sustaining it. So I'm a member of the Military Order of the Purple Heart. I'm an officer in the Department of Virginia Purple Heart and Military Order of the Purple Heart Department. And so I'm interacting with Purple Hearts around the country, and I interact with different groups. And one of the groups I'm a part of is called Purple Heart People. And it's not directly affiliated with the Purple Heart, but it does acknowledge participants who have Purple Hearts, encourages people who have Purple Hearts to join the group, et cetera, et cetera. So this group is full of racism, full of it. I mean, it's just chock full of it. And last 2 Thursdays ago, I had some time, and so I decided to post a article in the Purple Heart People group about Confederate bases in the South being named after Confederate generals. And so, I mean, this is not something foreign to me. I went to Bragg and Fort Benning for basic training and advanced individual training. And so I've got a relationship to these bases. And so when I put this topic up, everybody said no, they shouldn't be changed. It's history, it's heritage, blah 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 blah. You know, the usual stuff. Well, I decided to kind of go into these conversations with each of these different people who commented on the post, and I was able in many instances to create a dialogue that included some harsh edges, but ultimately led back to a sense of, a sense of like, um, a sense of neutral. So we got to a place where it was neutral. No bridges were burned. Um, so anyway, I went hard in that group. I was able to navigate it well, and now I'm out of the group. The reason I'm out of the group is because I got kicked out yesterday. And the reason I got kicked out yesterday is because the leader of the group on the Purple Heart People page posted a picture of the Stars and Bars, which is the Confederate flag, a form of the Confederate flag or the flag of Northern Virginia. It's not the real flag of Northern Virginia, but it's an adaptation that was made in the 1950s by racists in the government as an expression of white supremacy. And so that's what the Confederate flag was. That's the one they used, is the white supremacy flag. And they put Happy 4th of July, Happy Independence. And then a couple of the commenters who are particularly racist said things like, this is an American flag, and yeehaw, and all these supporting statements. And so instead of what I have done in the past, just kind of ignoring it, just like, whatever, I decided to be anti-racist and move into that space and start talking about what that flag really is, which is it's just a rag. I mean, it doesn't have value. It has value to racists, but it has no value to society at large. It was made specifically as a symbol of white supremacy in the 1950s by people who are just disgusting. And I don't want to have, there's no space in modern society for the 1950s racists. It's just not happening. And so I went in there and I started, shaking it up a little bit, being anti-racist, got some support, but then the guy shut down the comment section on that post. And then the next several posts were just, not overt racism, like the sneaky kind of racism. If I call white rice, am I racist? If I were, I have a white car, am I racist? Like all this kind of stuff that's very like the subtle racism as opposed to the overt racism. All that little sneaky shit that you just, I'll just leave it alone. Just leave it alone. But there's no consequence for them, but there is a consequence for people of color, which is a problem and that needs to be addressed, and it's being addressed right now. So I decided to make a big post, which said, stop posting racist crap. And I put my most powerful military picture on it, put some Purple Hearts next to it. And so not only did that post get taken down, but I got booted out of the group. And so I got booted out of the group, and I know a lot of the Purple Heart recipients in the group. I know a lot of people who are members of the military order of the Purple Heart who are in that group. And I know most of them don't post racist stuff. And I know most of them probably just are like, whatever. I'm not a racist, so I don't mess with that stuff. And it's just no longer okay. It's no longer okay to just not be racist. We've got to keep moving on this anti-racist platform that's being built by Black Lives Matter, so that racism has a social consequence, and then ultimately the goal would be to have a political consequence, a large political consequence, where you got to really go underground to be a racist if you want to do it freely. Otherwise, people are just going to be like, nope, you're being a piece of shit and you need to stop. So anyway, here's the whole point of all this. And this is the question that I'm trying to answer for myself, and I would love to participate in this conversation with you if you're interested, is how do I make that sustainable? Because part of what happened after the event was I became angry. And the anger was twofold. One was that this type of stuff happens and that this motherfucker had power inside of this Facebook group to sustain this racist platform, right? And that it's being sustained in the name of an honorable medal. Purple Heart, man. Come on. It's our nation's oldest medal, and you're using that name as a platform to talk about racism. It's not okay. Ugh, it's not okay. So, so this feeling that I have is anger, and it fires me up. And I took it home, and I brought it home, and I was shorter with my children, and then a bunch of triggers showed up around teaching my kid math, and then reading and watching when she struggles with math and reading triggers my feelings about school and not doing enough and and the pandemic. And so I was activated a lot yesterday. And activated means the sympathetic side of the nervous system was revved up. My focus was narrowed in. I was tense. I was quick to kind of be sharp and to talk like this. And I noticed that I could armor down a little bit, but I could feel it spin up. So on our way to moving from not being racist, which is, I accept that racist exists. I'm not racist, but other people are, whatever. If you're white, you don't have to worry about it because it's mostly white supremacists that you got to deal with, and they're the ones that have most of the power. So to be not racist is, privilege. It's a privileged position. It's cool. Good for you. You don't have to, you're not racist. Oh, thanks. Are you doing anything about it? No, I just leave that stuff alone. Well, because you can, right? So that there's anti-racism, which is I am going to make an effort to make there be a consequence in my spheres for racism. And so that's a new space to go into, and it's a darker space to go into. So how do you sustain it? How does it become a sustainable kind of way of being without the anger? Because the anger is not sustainable, and we've got to move. We got to keep moving until we get it built into the structures of our legal society, so that there's a consequence that gets out in front of the civilian consequence, the social consequence, the consequence in law. When that's there, the anti-racist person would theoretically have to do less work because the law's on their side. But currently, the anti-racist person has to make a move into this space, which is still a little bit ambiguous because 45's at the top and we know how he is. So the tricky thing is, how do you do this? Now, I mean, this is something that I'm sure people of color have addressed and dealt with, and it is, it's kind of a shame that me as a person of privilege is just coming to this realization, while people of color have probably been, people of color have certainly been dealing with this kind of anger and frustration inside of them, and of course they're dealing with racists, which is just double brutal. So, I'm kind of a piece of crap for only just coming to this really now. But anyway, so sustaining it and managing it. And I think that the thing about it is the practice, and what the practice offers in the context of creating an environment that's softer, that's more calm, that's sustainable in and of itself, which in a sense is preparation for or recovery from moving into the edge. So with that, I will get into the training. Let's say hi if anybody's here today, and then we'll just start the practice. Here's the get settled sound. How do you settle in? What do you do to make yourself the most comfortable? First bell. Slow everything down. And now, if you closed your eyes already, I encourage you to just open them. And with your eyes open, take a look around wherever you are. And as you're looking around, look for something very specific, something small to focus in on. Once you've got it, focus on that spot. And then what I want you to do is soften that focus and go into the periphery. The periphery. So go from seeing something small and focused to seeing as big as you can. So all sides of your visual field. Then go small focused, large open. Try to see the tops of your vision, the sides of your vision, and the bottom of your vision all at the same time. Really get broad. Okay? Now, I want you to pick two objects that are separate from each other. So, maybe to the right side of you is a bookshelf, and to the left side of you is a shoe. So try to see these two things at once, and then try to see the space between them. So instead of focusing on the objects, you focus on the space between the objects. It's kind of weird because what do you mean focus on the space between the objects? There's nothing there but space. Exactly. So it's going to mess up your mind's engagement with what you're seeing. So when you see a shoe, your mind's like, okay, shoe, it's brown, it's whatever. Your mind's comfortable with that. But when you ask your mind to look at the space between the shoe and the bookshelf, your mind gets kind of scrambled. It's like, what? It's very present making. You can really get yourself into the present moment by focusing on space. Okay, now go ahead and let that practice go. Maybe even shut the eyes. You might notice a sense of relief. And kind of do the same thing with sound. Okay, so pick a sound that's close and pick a sound that's further away. Now imagine the space in between the sounds, the two sounds. So for me, it's the space between the cars out on the main road. Excuse me. The cars out on the main road and the sound of the refrigerator in the garage. And I'm picturing in my mind the space between them. Taming the mind, bringing the mind into the present moment by studying space. All right, next, go into the body. Bell 2. Ground. Kind of bounce a little bit, kind of like if you're kind of like shifting, kind of like jumping up and down and kind of whatever on the ground beneath you, and notice how the ground beneath you, whatever's beneath you, stays or returns to stability. So you can really count on it. Okay? Next, move into the pelvis. With the pelvis, kind of shimmy, right? So it's kind of like shimmying your pelvis. Right? So here's what I'm doing. I'm just kind of, right? I still have my reflector belt on from walking the dog. So shimmy, okay? Shake. All right? Now come to the belly. Same kind of thing. Belly, shake it up. Shake, 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 shake. See my fat body moving there. All right. Then heart space, or chest space, shoulder blades. All right, you just shake that out. Shake, 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 shake. Jaw, throat. Shake, 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 shake. Top of the head, face. Shake it up. Shake it up. Shake it up. Shake it up. All right, now third bell. Okay, shake it out. Shake it up. Here comes third bell. Breathing. So just get your full inhale, full exhale, just one good round, kind of see where you're at. Now, practice long, open-mouthed exhales. So it looks like this. So let's add from yesterday. Shoulder blades back, chest up, big breath in. Open mouth, tongue out, exhale. Round shoulders forward, tilt chest down, big breath in. Open mouth, exhale. Blow the air out. Blow it out, all the way out. Shoulders down and back, chest up, big breath in. Open mouth, exhale. Now, let's just sit for a minute. So, anti-racism. To be anti-racist means to confront racism. To confront systemic racism. To confront all the different ways racism has been built into the hierarchical structures of American society. Speaking back to those things. Now, the challenge is that until it becomes kind of basic and standard and built into our laws in such a way that that racism has a consequence, society, kind of the protest movement, BLM and its allies, have to foster a way of interacting with racism without becoming kind of the darkness that racism is. The the expressions of anger. If anger is what drives the movement, that's a problem. If anger is what's driving my anti-racist engagements, that's a problem. And the reason why it's a problem is because I'm not the best version of myself when I'm angry, and I need to be the best version of myself when I'm practicing anti-racism. And so the reason why I added the shaking element in today, in the large exhale element, is because that's a very good technique for letting go of anger. And it's very much, the art of war, the Book of Five Rings. Like if you're interacting with the enemy, right? And the enemy doesn't have to be a person. The enemy can be racism. And it doesn't have to be the person who's racist. It can be just racism, so that there can still be a place for, compassion in your heart for the person who is racist. And the reason why you do that is not to be, hippy dippy or whatever. The reason why you do that is because anger is not an effective tool for sustained engagement. It's good for quick engagement, but it's not good for sustained engagement. So my intention around this is going to have to be around kind of recognizing when I feel angry and just taking a moment to kind of like, okay, reset, armor down, and get back to kind of an even. And the reason why I want to be that is because it's going to be a long time. We got a long way to go. So, I don't know. I'll pass on from there. I'd love to hear about what you guys are thinking about anti-racism and how you have been kind of inside of a situation where you've either been like, well, I'm not racist, so I'm not going to confront that. Or when you're like, you know what? It's time to confront this. And how did it go? What are you going to do about it now? Love to hear about it. Always a pleasure, Armor Down. I'll see you tomorrow.